Welcome to 2 Out the First. It is March the 28th, 2023. It's great to have you here with us. I am Ryan Ballingy. We have plenty to get to on today's show. We are presented by our friends at French Lick Resort in French Lick, Indiana. Two stories to talk about, two different topics. One concerning the PGA Tour and its new structure for next year. We get some more details on that last night. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the resurgence of Q School as we used to know it, which is very interesting. We'll talk about it in a couple of different contexts, particularly the L. So let's start with the PGA Tour's news. Came out, 7:30, 8 o'clock last night. First that I saw of it was from the folks at Golf Channel, and then more kind of trickled out. I think over time, memo was sent from the PGA Tour to its players regarding their structure for next year, and basically how everybody's going to get into everything, and how all the event structure is going to work, how the point structure is going to work, how all of this is going to kind of at least be formulated. We don't know the exact schedule. We do know there will be one fewer designated event for next year, and that's obviously going to be the death of the WGC match play, because that was a designated event. So that's going away. It sounds like everything else will more or less be the same. I think there's going to continue to be a rotation of events, but we shall see how that all sorts itself out in the end. But at least we have the framework under which PGA Tour players are going to earn FedEx Cup points, and which they are going to save or lose their card for next year. So, starting off everything. In 2024, the PGA Tour goes to a calendar year model. That calendar year model will run from January to August for the FedEx Cup season, and then there will be a fall portion of the schedule, and that will determine players' status for next year. How does all of that work? So, we're going to have a FedEx Cup season January to August. You'll have the playoffs in August like we will this year, and they will have different point values from this year for different types of events. So historically, in recent memory, there have been 600 FedEx Cup points to the winner of a major or the players. That will go up to 750 points next year. There was a tier for WGCs and elevated events, the special invitationals, Jack, Arnie, Tiger. That's 550. That will no longer exist because there will be a category specifically for designated tournaments. All designated tournaments will offer 700 FedEx Cup points to the winner. They have kept the same regular events. So 500 FedEx Cup points to the winner of regular events. And for the opposite field events, it'll be 300 points for the FedEx Cup race to the winner there. And then for the playoff events, they will continue to offer 2,000 points to the winner for the first two playoff events, which are the FedEx St. Jude Championship in Memphis and then the BMW Championship, which rolls around. Now, how does all of that work out in the end? So, you've got a playoff system that now takes in the top 70 players in FedEx Cup points. They get into the playoffs. If you get into the playoffs, you are exempt into every full field event and the players in the next season. So that's your benefit for getting into the playoffs. And then if you finish inside the top 50, which means you advance to the BMW Championship, you are in every designated event for the next year and the Players Championship, which is technically not going to be a designated event, but however that all works out. And I think something key to point out here is that what's considered a designated event this year is going to be different next year, because they're going to take out the designated tournaments that are there for the FedEx Cup purposes. So the playoffs won't count as a designated tournament. The Players really isn't a designated tournament because it's a full field event, even though it has the biggest purse, and they want to consider it like a major. And they also take out the major championship. So if you think about all of the tournaments this year, there were 17 of them, right? Now you're taking out the 3 FedEx Cup playoff events, the 4 majors, and the Players Championship. So you're taking all of that out. They are no longer going to be considered designated. They're just going to be on their own. Designated events, you're going to have 8 of them. One of them is going to be the Century Tournament of Champions, and it sounds like the path to entry there is basically just being in the top 50 in FedEx Cup points. If you do well in the FedEx Cup, you're going to get to go to Hawaii. I don't know if that means entirely they're going to get rid of the winners only thing, or how that's all going to work out, or maybe just the assumption is if you win a tournament, you're probably going to be in the top 50. Don't know exactly about that. But then they did send a kind of spreadsheet, PowerPoint slide about how people are going to get into designated tournaments and what the field will make up look like for those. So they're going to be 70 to 78 players. They're going to stick with no cut. I think that's a mistake, but this is what they're going to do. Top 50 in the FedEx Cup prior year, you get in. You're in. And then they're going to have 10 players that get in based on the current year FedEx Cup standings. So that's 60. And then they're going to have, I believe it's a handful of players who get in based on FedEx Cup points earned between designated events. So all the full field events that happen between designated events, whoever earns the most FedEx Cup points that isn't eligible, the next handful of players get in. There will be no Monday qualifiers. There will be 4 sponsor exemptions into those events. Those will be a little bit more restricted than they are currently, which means the players are going to have to fit some kind of criteria. Past champion, current status in the FedEx Cup, that seems like it's still being all kind of worked out, but they won't just be, hey, Charlie Hoffman has been the waste management and been a waste management guy forever. We're letting him $20 million. It's not going to be like that. They're going to limit that and make the pool smaller for sponsors to get their way and get certain players into the field. So I think that's something at least. It is a bummer they're going to take away the Monday qualifiers from all of these things. I think that's going to be the coolest thing about this year among some other niche storylines is having Monday qualifiers for $20 million tournaments. I mean, the one for Phoenix was nuts, absolutely nuts. And I would have loved to have seen that continue, but alas, that's the way that it goes. So you've got January through August. You've got how you get into the designated tournaments for the next year. Now what happens to the fall? And that's kind of been the big question mark. What happens? Well, what they're going to do is take all of the players who don't get into the top 50 and they're going to put them in a FedEx Cup points list that takes all of their points from January through August, and then they're going to add FedEx Cup points from the fall events. And the players who finish 51st through 70th in the regular season FedEx Cup, they're in regardless. They're good to go into every single tournament that's full field and the players. The benefit potentially for them is to get into the first 2 designated events of next year, of the next calendar year. So there'll be FedEx Cup points just like you would see in the regular schedule. They'll be available for the fall events. We don't know how many of them there are going to be, but there's going to be a combined points list between the regular season playoffs, or regular season I should say, and what you have left over. And then at that point, the players who wind up competing in that are going to try to get into the top 125. And those players will battle it out in those fall events, earning FedEx Cup points. So obviously, if you're higher up on the list, you start with a huge edge, huge head start, and you probably just have to earn a few and you're fine. For players who didn't play particularly well and didn't qualify for the playoffs and aren't in the 120, their motivation is to get into there. After the fall events, players who are ranked in the top 125, whether you're in the top 50, 70, whatever, as long as you're in the top 125, you're going to get into every full field event and the players the following year. If you wind up combined FedEx Cup points list in the top 10 after the fall, you're getting in the first 2 designated tournaments. So there is some motivation to play in those events if you're outside the top 50. What I don't know is whether there be motivation for the top 50 to play whatsoever. Could be a sponsor thing. Depending on what remains, could be that the Zozo Championship and the CJ Cup still exist as 78 player events with no cut, and there is a motivation to play those. I don't know. That remains to be seen what that all looks like. But then underneath that, if you don't finish in the top 125, now you have different categories as ways to get into PGA Tour events the following year. So you're going to have your 126 through 150 conditional status category, as they've always had. The top 10 finishers in the DP World Tour Race to Dubai points list will be eligible. You're going to have the top 30 from the FedEx or from the Korn Ferry Tour be eligible, and then you're going to have the top 5 in ties from Q School, which is technically PGA Tour and Korn Ferry Tour Q School at the same time. They all fall into the same category, and all of those people will be subject to the points reshuffle that happens already on the PGA Tour. And then beyond that, you'll have different categories, past winners, all that stuff that's way beyond, that really applies to like the 3M Open and the Oppo field events. But that's the structure. So that's 10 minutes worth of explaining what next year is going to look like. My overall reaction is they did the right things in creating higher points levels than they had previously. It was more flat, used to be flat. So if you qualify for the Masters or you get in through open qualifying for the US Open, or you get invited to the PGA Championship and you clean up, or you get through open qualifying for the Open Championship or through the open qualifying, and you do well, you can pick up some really important points that might help you get into that top 50 or top 70. I think that's important to point out. Having the opposite field events be worth less while remaining in the same points is also a good thing. I think that's important because, no offense to the opposite field events, but winning those a whole lot of benefit, and it will not get you a whole lot out of it in future years. You're going to get FedEx Cup points that you hope will be able to get you into other events because of your standing over the course of a season, and you'll get the exemption, but you're not going to get really a whole lot out of it. Current year winners, that's something I forgot to point out. Current year winners will also get into designated tournaments. So if you win a tournament, you're going to get into the designated events the rest of the way after the tournament that you won, which I think is really important to point out. So there is a big motivation to winning an event that is a full field tournament because it'll get you free paydays for the rest of the year. Obviously, the value of it increases or decreases over the course of the season, but winning is winning, and that gets you a chance at free money. Free money sounds good on top of the money you would win for winning a PGA Tour event. So that's important to point out too. Having more points for the majors makes more sense. The majors are more valuable to every player, and to say that they are 50% more valuable, I think is understating it in terms of points versus actual opinion. But for a lot of guys, that probably is pretty accurate because of the opportunities available. And for the money available, obviously the designated tournaments are also going to be very important. So putting them a notch below the majors is probably right. Would I have it at 700 points? Maybe not. But the PGA Tour has done a lot of modeling on this, I'm sure, and they probably played with it at 600, 650, 700. They've probably tried lots of different things. So they're trying to create an opportunity for turnover without necessarily guaranteeing that there's going to be a huge turnover, and that's probably right. Play enough full field events, and you do well in them, you way into the designated series by getting into the top 50. If you play poorly in the designated tournaments across the board and just don't have a good season or a middling season in the full field events, there's a good chance you fall out of that top 50. I think that's what they're trying to model out here by having 40% more value to the designated tournaments compared to the regular tournaments. So that seems like the whole list of it. We obviously don't have a schedule yet, so we don't know exactly how it's going to work, but the PGA Tour has said they're going to try to space out the schedule of designated tournaments so that there is basically 2 to 3 tournaments that are regular full field guys in between the designated ones. So there's an opportunity to earn points. There's a reason to play in those, even if you might be a designated player. Maybe your status is a little bit tenuous as a top 10, or you want to try to win and lock up a spot for the rest of the year. So they're trying to create motivations to play full field events otherwise. But if you look at players who are the best in the world, this is their schedule. I mean, they're playing the designated tournaments plus or minus, plus 2, 3 tournaments, something like that. But the 20 tournament model sounds like it's going away. So you're not going to have to play 20 to be in the PIP, but you're effectively going to play 20 anyway. You're just going to do it. So I think they've done the best they can here. They're going to tweak it. I mean, they have to tweak it. You're going to see some stuff you don't expect in year one. You're going to make some changes, make some alterations, either how you qualify for the events or what they do in the fall or all that kind of stuff. But I am somewhat surprised, but not entirely surprised they didn't change the fall and really just go to an entire model of it being based off of that fall season's points list. I am kind of surprised about that, but I guess they want to have the regular season mean quite a bit, and for FedEx Cup to have its name on the fall, they want the continuity of that, and maybe you get some players who are better that struggle a little bit and want to get some starts in. There is some relevance, I guess, to that, but all of those points are wiped out come January, and you start all over again. So instead of the current system that we've had, where the fall gave you an opportunity to get a head start, particularly if you're now the fall, and it's not that different. It's just a different perspective on that, and I can live with that, I suppose. But then you also have, for the Korn Ferry Tour players, the difficulty of not being able to play from when the Korn Ferry Tour season ends in end of September, early October until January at best. So you're going to get multiple months off. What does that mean for those players? Are they going to try to play mini tour events? Are they going to go try to play DP World Tour events? What are they going to try to do to stay competition ready for those couple of months? I'm very curious about that. So we will see what happens there, I suppose, because the top 10 on the Race to Dubai are playing through November, if not December. So those players are going to have a competitive advantage, at least in some fashion, because they'll have more reps recently than guys who graduated from the Korn Ferry Tour. I don't know if they'll do anything about that, to be determined there as well. All right, second story for this Tuesday show of 2 Off the First. And hopefully you guys are enjoying the recording tool a little bit better. First couple of days in, trying to do something just straight away in the morning, get it to you in audio form, then do the video edit, get out, and then the afternoon video. So hopefully that's working out pretty well and will continue to work pretty well. Second story for today is the sudden resurgence of Q School. That Q School has kind of come back full circle a little bit in the last, well, really, year, but it's going to start to really, truly come back full circle in the fall. So the LPGA has announced they're changing their final stage of Q Series, which had been 2 72-hole tournaments back-to-back. And they had a cut after the first 72-hole tournament and then a second 72-hole tournament to determine the PGA Tour, or excuse me, the LPGA Tour cards that they were doling out through the Q Series. Now it's going back to a 6-round tournament. The Q School used to be 5 rounds, used to be 90 holes to determine LPGA Tour cards. So they've tacked on 1 round, but those 6 rounds now look like what you would understand the old PGA Tour Q School to be. And they're going to offer cards that way. So they've gotten away from having a 2-week Q School, which I think is fair. I think it's probably better. I mean, I know the idea was to try to create an elongated tournament series that way you had the best players give the best opportunity to win instead of having a heater for 5 days and then getting your card and maybe struggling and not doing well. Adding that 6th round, I think, helps a little bit more, helps pull out the better players a little bit better perhaps, and that might work out. And at the same time, you can still have the opportunity to showcase the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail in which they play. So everyone can kind of work there. On the PGA Tour, this fall tour, of having PGA Tour cards, at least 5 of them in ties now being decided by the Korn Ferry Tour School, which I think is great. That means you're going to get a better quality of field for school for the Korn Ferry Tour. That also means you're just going to have more eyeballs on Q School, because what used to happen was if you didn't play well as a PGA Tour player, you didn't enter Q School. You just kind of sat on your laurel and waited to either get your Korn Ferry Tour status or play the Korn Ferry Tour finals, and hopefully that kind of worked out before that. You just kind of waited for empty starts to happen in the Oppo field events and the weaker field regular events of the course of the season. Well, now you have like Q School, and I'm curious what that will mean for Q School fees, because Q School fees have gone up significantly in the last couple of years. This may have many players, particularly the ones that have to go through a lot of stages to get through this. But at least now at the end of the rainbow, there's a possibility of getting a PGA Tour card and playing for huge money, as opposed to what we're going to see on the Korn Ferry Tour, where their purses are going to go up over time, but are currently $1 million. So you're paying all that money for the opportunity to win $180,000 in a start if you win on the Korn Ferry Tour. Doesn't sound quite as good as if you play really well and get your PGA Tour card, you could have a chance to go win at most, obviously the FedEx Cup, but realistically if you went and won a PGA Tour event, a 7-figure sum guaranteed. and that is a bigger draw. So maybe you get more players to enter Q School, you get better quality competition, you get more eyeballs on it, and all of a sudden it feels like the Q School, the Q Series has come back in vogue, and I think that's a really good thing. I know that the closed shop nature of having designated events on the PGA Tour is a downer to a lot of people, and I completely understand why you might feel that way, but at least having a potential gateway to the PGA Tour through Korn Ferry Tour Q School is great. For the LPGA, same thing. They've changed some of the exemption criteria a little bit, and so that they're going to make it, I think, a little bit better of a turnover. You're going to get not a better quality of player. There are a lot of quality players getting through Q School, but I think they're trying to find players through this series of six rounds instead of 8, where you're going to get a player who can continue to hold on to their card and not have to return year after year to get their card. So I appreciate that as well. And then we'll just throw this in because it just came across this morning on the LPGA side. They have a new event in Malaysia. They haven't been there, I think, in 6 years, I think the release said. The new event's going to be a limited field. That's how the Asian events work. And it's going to be a $3 million purse. So good news for the LPGA, a good change on the Q Series front. So far, it seems like the Epson Tour has been really interesting to kick off of the year. A couple of good events out there. It seems to kind of be lining up a little bit better. Now, the LPGA obviously doesn't have the same kind of crazy money involved as the PGA Tour has, but the majors are increasingly valuable. The money war that has taken place among the 5 majors in the last 2 years has been enormous. You're starting to see that trickle-down effect on the LPGA Tour schedule. I hope that continues. Very excited. Everyone in the LPGA to have another $3 million event coming up, and also hopefully seeing more prize money coming in their way, just trickling down to the regular events this year and in future years. All right, that's going to do it for us today on 2 Off the First. Thank you so much for watching or listening to the show. Catch us on the podcast platform. Please consider subscribing if you don't already, and give us a 5-star review. Comment helps reach more people. If you're watching on YouTube, please consider subscribing to our channel. Smash that like button, leave a comment. We'll be back tomorrow with another show. We'll go over all kinds of good stuff to get ready for the Valero Texas Open, the DIO Implant LA Open. We've got a Korn Ferry Tour event. We're a week away from the Masters. We've got the Augusta National Women's Amateur. So much going on, so much to happen in the next week or two. Very, very exciting as well. So thank you for watching or listening. We will talk to you tomorrow on 2 Off the First. Have a great day, everybody.